their language as well, so he can actually speak to them through their native tongue. And I'm sure that
he's constantly going like, I love you guys, I love being part of your community, I go to your town meetings, I go to your funerals, and which makes him just all the more like disturbing and disgusting, right?
And that's part of the performance from De Niro, because De Niro, obviously we've talked about him, we've seen him in countless things. He's a very charming actor and can also be incredibly terrifying. And his balance that he does with this character is great, because you see him do that, like, I'm beneficial for the community, I'm good to the Native American people and all of that. And when he's on screen initially, who his character is as an audience member. You know where it's going to lead, of course. But you can see that charm. And then there's times when he's just talking to his nephew or some of his lackeys, and he's just the most unbelievably evil person you've ever seen on screen, to the point where there's so many consistent deaths in this, and it happens like as if like there's a calculation to it. Of course, they're trying to make things seem, at least initially, like accidents and things like that, but the bodies pile to the point where it's like, how could you possibly think that this is all just accidents? So eventually, when he starts to get into a scene and he walks into a room, you start to just become instantly terrified and instantly nervous that he could kill anyone at any point at any time. There was not one point where I started to see him on screen that I was like, someone's dying in this room, you know what I mean? Or someone's dying the next scene, because what they're doing right now is setting up that death.
Yeah, he was just more willing to be kind of flagrant about it, right?
Yes.
Like he was more willing to be like open about exactly what it is that he felt, which was that these people had something that he deserved instead. And that, he and there were all kinds of sort of like basic laws and policies that, kind of screamed that was how these people felt. But so few people were willing to be like, well, I mean, we put a bomb in their house then, right? Like, it's the only logical conclusion to that. Like most of the other examples that come up a little bit in the film and in the book as well is like the whole like guardianship program, the incompetence program, which is where basically the members of the Osage were deemed too stupid to manage their wealth, and thus they needed to actually report all of their spending and seek like basic withdrawal permissions from like white guardians.
Which was just a setup so that they could have more control, of course, right? Like,
exactly. And not only that, historically, those people were siphoning their money like literally finding ways to be like, oh, well, you're going to buy a car. Well, here's the thing. I'll give you the money to buy a car, but you can only buy a car from my friend. And my friend is going to overcharge you by like triple for this car.
Right.
And they wouldn't say that, but that's how it would be. And so it was literally just like legalized corruption and racism, and like that was fine to all of the bankers, to all of the lawmakers, to just kind of
that's the thing too. It doesn't seem like I think you said it in the beginning of the review, where it was kind of like it's like a representation a little bit of the death of the West, like the death of the Western, and every like white character in this, for the most part, is just completely corrupt and awful and a part of this conspiracy. And I guess in a sense, whether it be the deaths of them or just just looking away, it's kind of the same thing at a certain point. Because again, there was the amount of destruction in this story is just unbelievable. It really is something that you're like, it rarely does the word like evil pop up and you really sincerely mean it, but this is that. It's just pure evil. It's an unbelievable amount of hatred.
It is, and it's Scorsese like using this very sort of like foundational sort of like genre imagery to go like, this is where the institutions, like, where the Wild West ended and the institutions actually got built, the sort of systems of sort of financial accumulation and financial management and, basic sort of like, they actually set up the towns, they actually set up how the banks work, how the criminal system works, how all of these things work. And it was like very clearly there was, sort of like racist attitudes baked into them, that they were like, this actually still does benefit some people in a very old school, kind of Western way, where it was like, here's a guy who just has more power and can deem, and that's just it though. This is around the time where they started being less overtly savage about it, that they weren't like, they were trying to hide the fact that they do this kind of stuff, and they were trying to hide it behind policy and trying to hide it behind, things like this. And that's where sort of like Hale and Burkhart came in, was that these were like the last guys who were like, no, we'll just fucking go cowboy mode. We'll fucking just shoot them and steal their shit. We'll just like fucking bank robbery, like who gives a shit, clearly this is allowed. Clearly everyone agrees and kind of thinks this way. There was a good review by, John Semley on Letterboxd, for anyone who follows him, where he had a great way of describing what it is that almost like the slow acting poison nature of what Marty is filming this as kind of captures, which is that this idea of sort of conniving or exploiting people. He described it as it feels metabolic. That it's basically just like, it's something that it's, even if you don't really understand that you're doing it, it's felt so deep down that you just kind of naturally gravitate towards doing it, which is so much of what like the Burkhart character is doing, right? Where DiCaprio is kind of playing him as someone who just kind of like falls into this plot. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's honestly depicted as a very simple, kind of stupid guy in a lot of the film, and he just naturally falls into this and kind of agrees to do it because it makes sense. It feels natural that he would just get involved in this, despite the fact of all of these signs that this is an incredibly monstrous and unnatural thing that they're doing. I think Will Sloan, too, friend of the pod, Will Sloan, compared him a little bit to De Niro's character in The Irishman, where it's like, I think he called it like the second movie.